Fire this week we had 10 inches of snow, but I'm hoping that snow is going to help the forest fire up there in Estes Park area. So, what's this all about? Every week I provide 3 lessons, oil painting, usually landscapes, on one painting. You're welcome to tune in and paint along with me. I think that I need to confess to you I'm only one part of getting good as painting. I really like people to get really good. And what I provide is only 1/3 of that. What I mean by that is I provide studio painting for you on a consistent weekly basis. 3 lessons like I mentioned. Keep doing that, you're going to get good. But you need 2 other things. One, you need critiques from credible people. I'd be glad if you want to meet a critique, you can do that. It's $35 a week. And you can come to a Zoom class that I provide along with this class every week. So you can have 3 Zoom classes and you can watch the YouTubes to follow up. The last thing you need is to get outside and paint. Painting, plein air as they call it, is very important. So with that, enough with me. This week we're doing something a little different. We're working on oil paintings to bring them up and get some punch out of them. And so that's what we're going to be doing this week. And this is the one we did today. So with that, let's watch the video. Bye-bye. Welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in today. I'm George Coll here in Loveland, Colorado, with yet another lesson on oil painting, landscapes, and other things. Now, we're doing something different this week. We're going back and looking at some old paintings and seeing how we can improve them. And so that takes a little bit different technique. I've never had a lesson like this online. I do this a lot with my students when we pre-COVID. And we'd have review weeks and we bring in old paintings. And what we're going to talk about today and learn about is applying new paint on dry paintings, which is, a lot of people like that technique. We're so used to working wet on wet, where we have the bottom paint interacting with the paint that you're putting on top, working wet on wet, which I teach. That's what I prefer. It's called alla prima. It's made famous, I think, by a number of artists in the past, particularly Richard Schmidt. And so I want to talk about, first of all, this one, which I'm not going to work on right now, but I want to tell you what I did because it was our last painting that we did 2 weeks ago. Last week there was no class because we were evacuated because of the fire. We had mandatory evacuation for 3 days. It kind of screwed things up for the whole week. But now we're back. We're so thankful to be back in our homes. And Estes Park was also spared by fire. But the reason I brought this up was because I worked on it a little bit. And I don't know if you can see the difference, but I want to tell you what I did off camera. I felt that my shadow was dark. It had the right value, but it was dirty. So what I did, I made a cobalt, ultra blue, and white mixture, and I lightened it up. Because as your shadows go farther back, they get your blues get a lighter value. And that's what I did, and I really like the outcome of that. And that's where those are the changes that I made on that. My Zoom class, if my Zoom class could unmute, and I want to know if you have any questions, Zoom class, on this one that you want to get some improvement on.
I just want to know what I should do to get the foreground lighter and more interesting, both the purples and the greens. Because you saw how dark they were.
All right, Jan's question was that she made her foreground pretty dark and she wants to lighten it up a little bit. Now I think another one of my students, I will not mention that person by name, but I think his first name started with an R, and he made his too light. And I think, sorry Ralph, I think what most painters tend to do is to make their shadows too light. So I'm really glad of Jan of making it too dark. And so when I critiqued Ralph, I said to darken that foreground. So what I did in the foreground, Jan, that you might find productive, is that I made a green, a dark green, a dark purple red, and I made these really kind of come alive a little bit. You know, we have these foreground flowers, so I made them subtle, but I put them in there. But to lighten up this area here, where the shadow is, I use my purple pinks and I use my greens to bring that up. I also brought that into the pasture out there below the barn, and I did the same thing. You might find that productive to bring yours up a little lighter. I'd leave these trees good and dark because they are verticals, and I left my fence line, all the growth under the fence line, I left that dark too, because I think it's a good lead in. The darks kind of lead into the barn, and then it goes to this nice expansive light. So with that, I'm going to move on to our next painting. All right.
One more question. What were the colors that you added to that shadow?
Let's talk about the greens, okay? So let's start
The
there.
ones on the mountain. Your dark shadow on the mountain.
It was ultra blue and cobalt and white. Now, I had some greens in there, and I still have them remaining, but those are from the original colors. You can actually see how bold I put those strokes on, boom, 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 boom. And just those few strokes really helped out there. Any other questions? I'm going to move on now to this one. And this one is a previous painting that we did some months back. And I want to talk about this one. And this is up in Mount Zirkle Wilderness area, I think is what the name of it is. And I just feel that the foreground is too dark. From here down's too dark. I like the area, I like the painting, but I'm going to be doing some lightening up to pop this painting to where I feel comfortable with it. So let me go back one more step. How do you choose what painting to fix? Well, if you're like me, you have a number of paintings sitting around and you're really proud of them, but some you go, gosh, I like the painting, but there's something wrong with it. So what I have to do is make my best stab at what's wrong with it. And with that, then I start working on it. And this one I just say, it's generally just too dark from about here down, and I need to improve that. So that's what I'm going to do today, and that'll be the majority of class, I think. If we still have time, I've got one more to do, which is more desert stuff, and how to improve a plein air painting, which this one is, out in Utah. All right, so with that, the thing I want to say to myself and to my students is when I start working on a dry painting is be careful when you put something on there because it can really pop. So I water down my paints with turp to start to make sure I'm not overemphasizing something I don't want to emphasize. For those of you on YouTube, you can look from the top. I'm using my regular 10, 8, 4, and 2. And I'm going to start with my 4. It's a flat. And I'm going to see what I can do with these two mountains in the back, and I'll start with those. So, like I was telling Jan in the last painting, I'm going to make a little bit of ultra blue, cobalt. I'm going to add some white to it. I'm going to add a little yellow ochre to it. And you can see how thoroughly I mixed it. And you can see the streaks of light coming through there, which is the glass showing. It's because I have a lot of terp in my brush. Now I want to see if this value is lighter than this one, so I'm going to test it over here. It's about the same, so I'm going to add a little bit more light to it. So it's titanium white. Let's try it again, and I think that's going to hit it better. It's not mixed very well, so let me get it mixed. It's better to mix with your palette knife than your brush, but so do what I say, not what I do. And I'm lightening that up with just those few strokes. Now if you're like me and having success like this, you want to use this all over the place, but be careful. And you can make some sky holes in your paint here. And now what I'm wondering, if these background mountains are too dark. Let me just try to screw that up. So the trouble with fixing a painting is you can screw it up, the good parts. Because once you put in something, you say, well, that needs to be changed. So now I'm going to just do some ultra blue and titanium white. I'm mixing that off to the side, and I'm going to say, need to lighten it up just a little bit more. Ultra blue, titanium white. Ooh, that has a nice effect. Since I lightened that, I'm lightening this up just a little bit. Oh my goodness, I'm getting lucky, folks. Let me bring a little bit of that same mixture I have here down here, see what it does. And it lightens that even a little bit more. Let me mix that with some of the original mixture. And just lighten that a little bit more. All right, let's move on to this guy here to the next, this big triangle here I have. One thing I have, I think my pinks are too distinct, and I think my darks are a little too dark. So let me start with the lightening the pink color, the rock color first. I'm picking up my color on my palette, moving it off to the right. I don't have much because it's such a thin mixture, and I'm cleaning my glass for the next mixture. So I'm going to make a pink. First of all, I'll use a light purple. You can make that by making ultra blue and a little bit of viridian. And I'm going to add some viridian to it. Oh my gosh, that went too strong, too fast. Be careful. That is a very strong color. These purples are so weak. Okay, now I'm going to add some pink to it. There we go, that's more like it. So what my Zoom students can see, and you Zoomers can see it, is that my overhead camera made a nice lighter pink than what I have on there right now. I'm going to use that same number 4 flat and see what that does. Too pink or too light. So I'm going to lighten that, darken it down just a little bit with a little bit more alizarin. Let me get some blue in there. So my pink was banging out too much, so I just added some blue to it. There we go. And I've lightened it up a scooch. I had a shop teacher named Mr. Sperlin. I liked to make furniture before I got into this type of art. And measurements were pretty exact with making furniture. And he'd always talk about, just add a scooch to it, meaning a small bit more onto the measurement. All right, now I want to go back to a blue-green, so let's do ultra blue, yellow ochre. Let's add some more yellow ochre, some more ultra blue. And I want to add a little bit of white to see how this is doing. That's not enough. Added more blue. And I think I've finally got it in here. And that's come up. So instead of more blue, it's got a little bit more green in it because it's closer, and you can start seeing some of that green. Now to describe trees up here, I'm kind of running some over the pink to show with an upward motion that I've got some trees here. All right, standing back, I still think it's a little dark, so I'm going to add more blue to that mixture, which was yellow ochre, ultra blue, and I'm adding more blue, a little bit more blue. So it's actually a blue-green. And adding some of these lights back in here. Because as I remember the reference, the rocks didn't stand out as much as I had them originally. And now I'm going back and adding a little bit more lights in where the rocks are. And that seems to have done the trick. All right, before I get into these trees in foreground, I'd like to know if the Zoomers have any questions. All right, getting a new paper towel. As you can see, I'm pretty personable with my camera. It's right here, so I try not to kick it too much. And I'm just checking my record buttons, and everything seems to be working just fine this morning. So I like working wet on wet. So sometimes if I'm going to do an area, I want to weten it up again. So I add a little color to it. I'm using the same color as I used back here. It's ultra blue, yellow ochre, with just a little bit more blue in it. So here I was working wet on dry, and this one I'm adding a wet base of a yellow ochre blue so I can work wet on wet. And I'm just using the side of my brush, and you see how frequently I'm reloading to add some wet to it. Now, I didn't cover everything totally, completely, but this is how you get some of that loose feeling about, you know, impressionistic painting, is just using the side of the brush like I do, and pat, pat, pat. But the important thing is, have some, when you're doing that, have some paint on your brush, for gosh sakes. Too many of my students overuse the brush and there's no paint in it. All right, now what I want to do is I'm going to add some cad yellow, ultra blue, so one's more orangey and the other one's more ultra blue. So I'm going to tilt my camera down so my Zoom students can see this. So here's the more yellow from cad yellow and ultra blue, and this is more less cad yellow and more ultra blue. All right. So in there ought to be the right stuff. So let me see what I can do here. I'm going to add a little olive to that mixture. There we go. And I'm going to, I kind of went, I think, a little bit too far down with that one, but I want to try to keep this lighter color on top. More darks will be on the bottom. And I'll bring these ones on the end all the way down. So that mixture again is cad yellow, ultra blue, and a little bit of olive. And you say, what is that technique you're using on your brush? And you can see I'm flipping it around to show that I'm using the paint on various sides of the brush to keep fresh paint flowing off my brush. So it's kind of the flipping stuff off. Now, one thing I want to make sure is that this stuff is showing up from the background, and I think it is doing it very subtly and very nicely. So now that I want to go to the darker part of that mixture and put it on the lower parts here. And you can see, ooh, that is working, folks. Sometimes I fall flat on my face here in front of you all, but this time, this is looking nice. And I'll come over here and work some of that darker color in here now too. And I work some up here and have more on the base. And of course I'm getting short on product now, so I'll go back, get some more ultra blue, mix it in with my yellow. Cad yellow is really sometimes mistaken for orange. Some of the products from some of the companies, it's so light, or I mean so orangey. Okay, now I have a big dark in here in my tree, so I'm going to bring some of these oranges down a few places. Excuse me, I have to answer my phone. I'm just going to say, can I call you back later? I love those little buttons on the phone. All right, now I want to go a little bit lighter on the very top. So I'm going to go mix some Naples and Cad Yellow and mix it into the blue just a little bit, and I'm hoping to get a little bit lighter right there. And don't go overboard on this stuff. It's really strong. And if you go overboard, just scrub it down and dull it, like I did there. See, it was a little too bright, just go back and forth, and it'll take it down into that. It'll dull it down with what's below it. Now that one I screwed up. Let me get some more darks in it. And if you have too much of that in there, too much light, and you want to go back and add some dark in some places, mix some blue ultra into your mixture and go put some back in your darks. Back and forth, back and forth. And again, this isn't like when we were growing up with coloring books. You can go outside the lines, like I did just there. It made like a branches coming off to the side. But if you do that too much with your lights, it'll just blare it out too much. All right, I'm going to finish off the trees here with some vertical strokes. So I'm going to go some cobalt, some gray, and a little bit of orange. And that's too light. I'm going to add some burnt sienna to it. And I'm going to put some verticals in here. I can show you how to get rid of these ones that are too dark or too big. We'll just go back over them here in just a second and straighten out those mistakes. I had to fix a problem I had right here, so I'm adding some more blue and light to it. So if you make a too globby of a mistake there, just come back with your darker color and soften it up a little. Just run over it and it's gone. I'm kind of partial to these rocks. I think they're okay, maybe a little bit too purpley blue, maybe a little too dark. So let me add some Naples to that mixture. So I'm adding some Naples to the purple mixture I have that I've been using up in here in the mountains, and I'm going to try some of that and just add some warmth to all that cool area down there. So when you have too much cool in an area, see if you can get some warms in it. Those would be your browns and Naples and oranges. And I'm just tapping this in a few places just to give it some effect of looseness and so forth. Okay, I've got these nice darks down here and I don't want to lose them. And so I'm going to accent a few of them. I'm going to do ultra blue, burnt sienna, ultra blue, burnt sienna, little viridian. That's so dark. It's a little too dark back there. And I'm going to run a dark up from down here to connect the darks from down below. Okay, with that done, I'm going to warm up some of my worms down there. I'm going to lighten them up. So I'm going to add some white to my cad yellow. I'm going to add a little burnt sienna to it. And that's adding a lot of interesting light to this.
What's that mixture, George?
It was cad yellow, Naples, and a little bit of burnt sienna. Now I want to work on my my grass area. I'm going to do some yellow ochre, permanent green. Permanent green is very powerful. So lean more on your Naples than your permanent green. Otherwise it's going to say green. We want it to say green. And as you can see, I'm not laying the paint on real hard. I'm kind of running it over softly. I'm letting some of that undercolor come through. And that's lightening things up right there. I'm going to see if I can try something interesting here and add this in a few other places. And I'm going to put some back in way back here and just see if I can see if that'll do any good. Didn't do a darn thing. All right. You can experiment, sometimes it doesn't work. Now with this, I'm going to get back and see if there's anything more I should do to this painting. Zoomers, you can unmute and give me your feedback.
Looks pretty nice to me, George.
Thank you, Anthony. I think my darks are a little too dark. I'm going to add some blue to them. Ultra blue, cobalt, ultra blue, cobalt.
Say hi to Ellen before she leaves.
Bye, Ellen.
Hi, George.
Ellen's been out inventing a new sport,
Which is?
hauling trash cans through the snow.
I just brought mine back from, we got our trash picked up. I think those guys just like to get out on a snowy morning and see if they can do it. And they did.
Probably can't.
No, they were here. So I'm just doing adding a touch here and a touch there of dark here, light here. And I'm going to add a little bit more lightener to some of these orangey guys, which is that permanent green. So I'm actually making a Naples and a permanent green. And I'm adding that on top of some of these dark oranges I have. And it's giving the impression of pine tree green. So I'm knocking down some of the orange I've got on there. And I like that. Sorry to spend so much time on this one. How are we doing on time? Oh, we are getting a little bit, don't know if we can get to the next one on this, but let me at least finish this where I like it and tell you why I'm doing what I'm doing. I lost some of my darks there, so I'm recreating that. And I'm thinking I've got this painting where I really like it now. And you say, well, where do your trees start and where do your grass begin? And I think with Impressionistic painting, we kind of let the viewer's eye determine that. Because if you get up too close to our paintings, you go, what the hell's going on here? It's like blobs of paint, but if you get back, that makes a tremendous amount of sense. Oop, too much. Too much. Get some more darks back in that area. I'll bring down some background pinks in here. See if I can help that situation back in there. I'm going to have to bring the YouTube class to an end here in about 2 minutes because I'm running out of time. Otherwise it just takes so long to download because I do 3 or 4 different downloads, one from my camera to the computer, and then a computer into a file, and then file into YouTube. And then I'll send you out a class update by Constant Contact. Any of you YouTubers that want to be on Constant Contact and get weekly updates, as well as the Zoom information, you're welcome to text me and with your email address, and I'll get you taken care of. So with that, I'm going to bring my YouTube class to an end, and I want to say thank you very much. Thanks for coming by.